Okay, this afternoon we're going to talk about scoring violations, or as I like to call it, how to cheat 101. Now we are going to learn about how to cheat, but before we do that, we're going to talk about scoring violations, what they are, and to some extent what to do about them, because this can be a real dilemma for in a school. What do I do with a child who cheats? What do I do with a child who constantly cheats? It can be a real challenge. So we're going to talk about some of those things this afternoon, and then I'm going to tell you all the different ways that I know, well, at least a large number of the ways that I know that you can actually cheat using ACE. I haven't put all of these actually into practice myself. Many of them I have seen in my experience in the Learning Centre. Some of them I've seen when I've been visiting schools. Some of them I've learned from staff training. Oops, that's a bit of a worry, isn't it? And some of them have been told to me, but they're all things that have happened in learning centres in one way or another. So they're not things that we're just making up to, you know, make you laugh or anything else. These are all actual things that have happened when we get to that point. But we'll do the unexciting bit first. So let's get going. It's about character. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but they that deal truly are his delight. And Proverbs 12:22 tells us that. And we want our children to understand that when they do what is right, then the Lord delights in them. And, you know, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing that I'd like more than to be considered the Lord's delight. I think that would be a really wonderful place to be. But we all know that the heart is deceitfully wicked above all things, and that it's very easy for us to tell things that are not the truth, to speak lies. And so one of the things that we need to actually teach our children is character is who you are when no one's looking. That's real character. You know, it's very easy to put on the I'm holier than thou face. You know, I'm the good person in the class. I never do anything wrong. It's all very easy to have the right words to say. And particularly, and I'm not picking on anybody here, but particularly if you've been brought up in a Christian family, you know all the right words, you know all the right ways to say things, and you know all the, you know, the right things to do. Oh, of course, I'm terribly sorry and I would never do it again. I'm repenting from the bottom of my heart. You know the words, but character is who you are when no one is looking. And that's what we've got to try and teach the children, because scoring is actually all about character. It's not just about reinforcing the learning, it's about character. And the temptation to do the wrong thing is great. You've been in the Learning Centre today, and one of the things that I really like to do in the Learning Centre is to watch people when they're scoring, because body language is a very interesting thing. And you get the people who are scoring, and you know, they're at the scoring desk, and they come to the one where they get it wrong, and it's like, and you get the ones who go, oh, and you get the ones who just put a cross there and they, yeah, well. So body language is different for all of us, and we all respond differently to things, but we all know the frustration of getting that answer wrong, don't we? And it can be very frustrating. And I want you to think, because today you only got it wrong once. Imagine if you're a student and you went to the scoring station and you got it wrong, and you went back to rescore. Maybe you got 5 or 6 wrong, and you go back to rescore and you get 2 or 3 right, but you still get a few wrong. They're still wrong, and you've already changed the answer. So now you're going, oh, and you go back and you go back again. And sometimes they'll go back 3 or 4 times to the scoring table for one answer, and that can be extremely frustrating. And under those circumstances, it can be very, very tempting just to cheat. Okay, So I'm not saying it's right, but I'm saying there are circumstances where it is very tempting for the children. Okay, so this is what I call the theology of scoring. Students are responsibility to score all activities, checkups and self-tests except pages with a supervisor's score strip. Score keys are a trust. Now that's a really hard concept to get over to children sometimes, that I'm trusting you to do what is right. And it's something that they don't actually take seriously often until it's taken away, that trust, and someone has to go to the score table with them, or they have to have their scoring checked every time. So trust is something that is often not well understood by children. So you need to actually work out a way. I believe that you're going to do this right every time you come to the scoring table. You need to build that up in them, build that faith in them, and build that sense of, hey, I can do this right, and encourage them. You need to encourage them when they do what is right. It's very important. So often we only tell them when they do something wrong instead of encouraging them and rewarding them and praising them when they do things right. So the theology of scoring is that it is a trust, and we need to teach the students to handle that trust. We don't grow up naturally knowing how to do the right thing in many cases. Unfortunately, we do grow up knowing how to do the wrong thing fairly easily. I never ever had to teach my children to say no or to do naughty things. You know, maybe you did have to teach yours, but I never had to teach mine. They learned it all by themselves.
Inbuilt.
Yeah, it's inbuilt. Yeah, that's right. And so, you know, we shouldn't expect that all of a sudden, because they're in the learning centre, these children who seem to automatically know how to do the wrong thing are going to automatically know how to do the right thing, because they're not. You're going to have to teach them what is required from them. And you're going to have to build relationship so that they want to do what is right. Okay, supervision. Inspect what you expect. If you never look at their paces, then the chances that they're cheating have just skyrocketed. If you are not taking the time to look at the work that they are doing, then many children will take shortcuts or cheat because they know they can get away with it because nobody's watching, nobody's checking, nobody's looking at what they're doing. So you need to learn to inspect what you expect. You need to tell the children clearly what you do expect, but then you need to follow that up by checking on what they're doing. The less mature, the more supervision. This is a rule of thumb. Notice I am not saying the older. I'm not talking about age here. Some very small children are very mature and some older children are very immature. So we're talking about maturity level. The more mature they are, the less supervision that they actually need. Vice versa, the less mature, the more supervision, more mature, less supervision. So you're not looking at the age of the children. You might have some children that you know that can go to the scoring station, and most of the time they are going to do exactly what is right. And so they're the ones that you trust more. You allow a little bit more freedom, but you still need to check on them because none of us are perfect and temptation comes to all of us. We need to, number one, effectively regulate the score key usage. Now, I'm going to show you something. I have a score key here. Okay. Score key. I am at the scoring table and I have my score key and my pace. It is very, very easy to put my scores key inside my pace and walk back to my office. If you don't regulate the use of your score keys, then you are going to find that students really quickly work these things out. And you're going to wonder, wow, they got through that English pace in record time with not one mistake. That shouldn't be a wow. That should actually be setting alarm bells off in your mind going, uh-oh, they got through that English pace in record time with absolutely no mistakes. I better check what's going on here. So you need to make sure that score keys are in a place where it's clear that the student is getting the score key out and it's clear that the student is putting the score key away. A lot of schools have a shelf underneath their scoring table and they just put the score key under the shelf. That's really, really bad, because what happens, you're not going to know. The other thing you can do is you can put your score key in a folder so that it makes it harder, it makes it far more visible. Or particularly for those of you in the islands, one of the things that I suggest you do is when you get your score key, you actually very carefully take the staples out, cut it down the middle, take the test out, of course, but cut your score key down the middle and put it into one of those folders with the clear plastic sleeves. And that way it will last a lot longer in your hot and humid climate, but it also means it's really hard for the students to sneak a folder back to their office, whereas this is very, very easy to do. And unless you're actually looking, you wouldn't even see it. So that is number one way of cheating. Well, it is one of the ways of cheating. It's actually not number one, but it is one of the ways. So please regulate your score key usage. You don't have to go and spend a lot of money and buy a lockable filing cabinet or anything like that. You can simply have them in a box, sorted in folders or something in a box where the student has to go and pick the score key up, go to the scoring station, and then take it back. Because you're going to see that far more than you are going to see if they're just sliding it under the desk or sliding it inside their pace. Okay, quiz the students before checkups and self-tests. Now that's something that you should be doing, particularly if they have errors in their work. They should be quizzed before the checkup and the self-test. And if you don't know what questions to ask them, then ask them what they've learned. That's a general all-purpose question that works for any pace at all, maths pace. What have you learned in this pace? Nothing. Oh, okay, so what are these answers for? Oh, well, they're subtraction. So you learned subtraction. Oh, yeah, I did. Okay, so you can, they're just general purpose questions that you can ask. And you can get the student to answer. Don't ever accept nothing for an answer. Push them further. Spot check paces about to be scored. Now that's something that I do, and I do it fairly quickly because I am very used to the staff training paces, and I can usually fairly quickly spot if there's something fishy going on in them. But when you are in the Learning Centre, you should be familiar with the paces that your students are using. Now this can take time to happen, but you should be a little bit familiar with the paces. So you should be able to quickly pick up a pace, look through it and go, okay, all right, yes, they've answered all of those questions fine. I can't see anything out of place here. Oh, now that's a really silly answer. You know, Jesus took my sin away, tadpole I am saved. Oops, that's not quite the right answer, is it? So maybe I need to talk to this student. So just quick check-throughs, doesn't need to take you long, just flick through, have a look before they're going to the scoring table. Monitors, that's your job to release them to go to score. So you need to train your eyes to see all of these things. Use cross-referencing on wrong answers. That is when they go back and refer to where it is in the text of the pace. or in checkups, it's where the question is. So cross-reference to the question where they answered that in the body of the PACE, not the checkup. Make sure that all staff and learning centres in your school are following the same procedures, because this is where students will find little loopholes if you're following different procedures in different learning centres. So it's a good idea to make sure that all the learning centres are doing things exactly the same way. And it provides continuity for the students as they go through the school, so that if they know how to score in year 1, they know how to score in year 5, because it's exactly the same. Check your resources and literature books for markings. This morning somebody said to me, oh, there's answers underlined in your procedures manuals. And I went, yes, I know.
Don't all work either.
Yeah, I know. Every single training I say to people, please do not draw or write or underline or do anything in the procedures manual. And every training, after the training, I usually spend a day rubbing things out, which is really irritating. Yeah. But look in your resource books, in your literature books, because often children think that they're being really helpful and they underline the answer in the book for the next person. Isn't that kind of them? So that's something that you just need to be aware of, because it definitely happens. It happens in mine, so it's going to happen in yours. And the students should know that every PACE is going to be checked before checkups, at self-test, and before they take the PACE test. So when you hand your PACE in to me, what I do is I look through it and I want to make sure that you've passed your checkups and that you've passed your self-test. I don't just take your PACE and whip it off and go, right, tests, right, I've done my bit. It needs to be looked through and checked. And again, you don't need to take a long time to do it. It's only a minute. But as you train yourself to see things, you'll pick things up quite quickly. Make your presence known to students when they are scoring. Prevention is wonderful, and oftentimes we can prevent a child from cheating at the scoring table simply by our presence. If we normally have a favourite place that we stand in the learning centre when we're not answering a flag. Don't be standing and talking to another supervisor or the monitor. Be watching what's happening, and be standing somewhere where you've got a view of what's happening at the scoring table. You don't even need to be standing facing the scoring table, but just be standing there that they're aware of your presence. It can be a real deterrent to them when they are thinking about scoring. Okay, scoring violations, they will happen. If you tell me that your school has never ever had anybody who's had a scoring violation, I'm afraid I will doubt your word. Because I've been in enough schools with enough students to know that even in the very best schools, and even if you do all of these things that I tell you, that scoring violations will still happen. Now, sometimes they're errors, sometimes they're deliberate. We're more concerned with the deliberate ones. So how do you handle it? All right, the first thing is, when a child deliberately cheats, they're not cheating you, they're not cheating the system, they're actually cheating themselves. And so, it's not going to affect you if they cheat, is it? You're not going to fail a PACE test because you're not going to do the PACE test. It's them that is going to actually have the problem at the end of the PACE if they cheat. So they need to understand that when they cheat, they're actually robbing themselves. All right, what's your foundational scoring policy? A lot of people say honesty is the best policy. I say honesty is the only policy. If it is not the same, it is wrong. Remember that God delights in those that do right. And we really want to push that sort of idea with the children that, you want God to delight in you. So why are you doing this? You know this disappoints everybody. It disappoints you, it disappoints me, and it disappoints God when we do what is wrong. Okay, I got it wrong. Now, I want you to listen very carefully here. It's not wrong to be wrong. A lot of children feel that if they make mistakes in their paces, that they're not good enough, that they've done something terrible, and that you will never ever like them. Now, you might think that's way overstating the case, but it's actually not. And there are a lot of children who don't have a lot of self-esteem, particularly if they're in dysfunctional families, broken homes, abusive situations. You don't know sometimes what's happening in a child's home. But sometimes they're so worried about getting something wrong that they will cheat. And it's not because they necessarily even want to get it right. What they're actually looking for is your love and approval. So you need to be thinking about it. It is wrong not to admit that you are wrong. So if you've done something wrong, then you need to be able to say, yes, I did it wrong. So that's where the issue is. We need to remember that scoring is simply matching. Is it the same or is it different? A Year 1 student can actually score a physics PACE. Now, I didn't think this was true. When I heard this, I did some training in the United States with ACE, and I remember the Mrs. Dawson, who was presenting this session about scoring, said a Year 1 student can score a physics PACE, and I was like, maybe, maybe. And she said if they can read well in Year 1, they can score a physics PACE. So I actually tried it. When I was in Indonesia, I was at a school and there was a Year 1 student that I was talking to, and he could read very well. And so I said to him, come with me. And we went into the senior classroom and we found a physics PACE that somebody was working on. And I said to him, can you score this PACE for me? And he went, yes. And here he is, this tiny little thing, fingers like this, going down the PACE. That's right, that's right, that's wrong. He could score the physics PACE. So if a Year 1 can score a physics PACE, which is a Year 11, 12 level PACE, then there is no excuse for them saying, oh, well, I didn't know how to do it. If you've taught them how to score, then they actually know how to score. It's a very, very simple task. Is almost good enough. Well, it was almost right. Well, that's good. So I actually had this conversation with a boy at our school. This is actually a real live example. His math, he'd done some math, and he was close to the answer, and he'd marked it right. And he said, well, it was almost right. And I went, well, that's really good. He used to clean our school, and I used to give him a small amount of money for it. So that week when he'd cleaned the school and he came to me, I gave him some money. And he looked at it and he went, that's not right. I went, well, it's almost right. Is that okay? No. Well, why not? It was okay in your PACE. Well, no, it's not okay. So, you need to teach them almost is not okay. And you can't have it both ways either. So you need to sometimes have these really good opportunities where you can actually show them that it's not okay to do it that way. And they wouldn't expect it to be okay in many things. So basically, if it doesn't match, mark it wrong. If you have a question about whether it might be right, you raise your flag and you ask the question. Look, the score key said this, I've got this, is that okay? Is it the same? And then what the supervisor will do is we'll put a circle around your X with the green pen if it's okay, or she'll say, no, you need to fix that. Okay? So it's really simple. All right, evidence of scoring violations. Here we go. Extra red marks on PACEs. The letter E is a really good one, because what they do is, see that tip in the right there? Just put a red dot there and that's the right word. Yep. Anything that has a cross or a space, like there, O's are really hard because there's not anywhere you can actually hide the red dot. But most other letters are really good for hiding red dots. And to put a red dot on a word, just to say this was the correct answer, is a very simple thing to do at the scoring station, because you're there, you're going along at the scoring station, you've put your cross here and nobody notices if you just put a dot there, do they? So, because that was the correct answer. So that's how they do that. Writing on hands and arms. Now you might go, well, that's really, really obvious, but it's not always really, really obvious. Great place to write something when you are trying to cheat. You don't ever write it here or here or here. They're way too obvious, okay? When you hold your pace, your elbow is actually bent. This is a wonderful place to write things because you're holding your pace. It's totally covered up. So I told you, yeah, these kids are really, really smart. The other place that is really good for writing is along the side of your finger, because again, you're holding your pace. Nobody can see it. Whereas it's quite obvious here, if you write here or on the palm of your hand. But along the side of the finger and in the elbow, the crease for the elbow are two actual favourite places. And it just looks like they're just doing something, you know, like they're just messing around at the scoring table and you don't take much notice, and all of a sudden we've got answers written there. So yes, the other place is under watch bands. Underneath the watch band is another place that they really like to do it. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's no good if you're not wearing a watch. But we all have elbows, so, you know, we've still got a chance. Yeah, Ben's got long sleeves on. Hidden pencils. Now, this one is really quite interesting. I was actually in a school and I was talking to a teacher, and a lot of scoring tables have a lip where they have the sides there, and there's a bit of a lip underneath. Well, I just happened to be, to have my hand on here, and I just put my hand on the edge, and I thought, what's that? So I went down, and all the way along the scoring table, there were pencils blue tacked under the scoring table. Yeah. So, I told you, children are very, very creative. They'll either end up as entrepreneurs or prisoners. But these are things that I have actually seen in learning centres. The other one, now this was actually one of my students. He was also very creative, not in a very good way sometimes. But I could not work out how this boy, who really struggled to do his schoolwork, how he was getting so many of his answers right. And what he would do was he would go to score, and while he always used to take a long time to do anything, so nobody thought anything of it, and he would take extra time at the scoring table, he would have a little piece of lead just sitting underneath his fingernail, and he would write the answers in for the next page. So they can be extremely creative. I would never have thought, I'm obviously not a creative person, because I didn't actually think of any of these, or very few of them. Nonsense answers, like the one I gave you the example here, where they wrote tadpole in the sentence. because tadpole actually happened to be one of the words that was up the top here. So if the monitor's just quickly glancing down, they're going to see the word there and go, oh yeah, that's okay. The clue is when all of them say tadpole. That's something you need to watch for, because sometimes, even though they're creative, they're not all that smart. So sometimes you can pick up nonsense words where they don't know the answer in the pace. And what they'll do is they'll write a nonsense word in because they know they have to have the space filled in, and they'll write a nonsense word in there. They'll go to the score table, they'll come back, they'll do their scoring. They won't mark it wrong, they'll just change it to the right answer that they've remembered from the score key. So you just need to watch out for that. I don't know any way that you can actually stop that from happening, but just watch out for the nonsense answers. Spelling errors are a big one that often students won't pick up because they don't want to have to rescore. So, you know, oh, it doesn't matter, it was in my science pace, it doesn't matter if the spelling was wrong. Yes, it does. So that should be picked up when you're doing you check through. Now the other one is if they take their pace home for homework, and young Freddie takes his pace home for homework, he normally gets 1 or 2, maybe 3 wrong in each, you know, for each time he scores. And he takes his homework home and everything is 100% right every time he takes his homework home. I think he's getting a little extra help there. The other thing to watch with homework is watch for handwriting, because sometimes, you know, well, Uncle Joey did it for me. So is there something wrong with that? Yes, there is. So just some things to watch out for. Okay, the results of scoring violations. The results of scoring violations are often failed checkups, self-tests or pace tests. Now, often it is only the pace test that they'll fail. If you have students who are getting 100% on their checkups, 100% in their self-test, 35% in their pace test, and it happens, then I can tell you that they are either cheating or they are looking back and filling in answers for the checkup and self-test. They're not actually learning the answers. They're looking back while they're doing the test. Now remember I said I had a friend. If you think they're looking back, you need to staple their pace at their checkups and self-tests. Or the other thing that some schools do is that they make them sit at the testing table for checkups and self-tests, so that they don't, you know, it's far more obvious they're not actually in their office, they're actually sitting at an open table where you can see if they're looking back. So, but they aren't, that's the results. If they study the wrong answers, they'll give the wrong answers on the test. That's just how it is. How to detect scoring violation? Well, you need to be watching out and monitoring the use of score keys. Are they secure? Look at their body language. Now, you know, sometimes I've seen, and I've actually seen this happen, and it's quite funny when you're watching it happen. You know, there'll be, and it's often the little ones who think they're going to get away with it, you know, and they'll be standing at the scoring station and they'll have their arms up like this and they'll be looking around to go, so watch their body language. You can learn a lot about what they're doing at the scoring table simply by watching them. If they're taking an extra long time at the scoring table, you want to be watching that too. Watch for boy-girl scoring. Now this isn't actually cheating, but this leads to things not being checked properly. Often scoring tables have the, you know, like this, and so you have the boy on this side and his girl on this side, and they're scoring their work, looking lovingly into each other's eyes. Oh yeah, it happens. So monitors, if you know that there is a relationship between the boy and the girl, or you suspect that there's something going on there, don't let them go to the score table at the same time. Very simple way of fixing that. Just say, if he's at the scoring table, you say to her, just wait. When she's there, you say to him, just wait. And don't let them do that, because otherwise they're not thinking about it. Use the police car philosophy. Do you know what the police car philosophy is? All right, if I'm driving down the road and I see a police car, do I just sink my foot on the accelerator and let her go? Or do I stay within the speed limit because I know the policeman's there and I don't want to get caught doing the wrong thing? Police actually deter a lot of things simply by being present. So we're the same in the Learning Centre. If you are very present in the Learning Centre, if the children know that at any moment you're likely to turn around and watch what they're doing at the scoring table, or you're likely to pick up their pace and say, oh, I just thought I'd have a look at what you're doing today. That can be really, really disconcerting to a child who's just come back from the scoring station and has cheated. And you go to them and you quite unknowingly pick up their pace, and you've just got them and they're sitting there and they're shaking like this. And all of a sudden you're going, okay, I'm picking something up. What am I going to find in here? So, be aware of those things and use that fact of your presence in the Learning Centre to make sure that the students are doing what is right. Watch for homework, check handwriting, and talk with parents. Parents need to understand that when they come to an ACE school, it's not like the school that most of our parents went to. So they don't understand how it all works or anything else. So communication with the parents, saying when your student does this and we trust them to do their own scoring, we do check up on it, but it's their responsibility. And parents will often help you and talk to the children about things like that. Not always, but if you don't try, you're never going to get that help. So talk with parents, particularly about homework, about how it's their responsibility to do the homework, not anyone else's. So checking your resource books and literature books, spot checking spot quizzes and checking checkups and self-tests, checking answers in paces are correct, spot check paces about to be scored or that have just been scored. Oftentimes you can get them going back from the scoring table and just say, oh, show me what you're doing. And again, you can pick up nonsense answers. No work on maths problems is a really good one. Okay, let's see how good you are. No phones, no calculators. All right. If I have, what is 3,427,008 divided by 42? Can you tell me the answer? No? That's good, because I wouldn't know if you were right or wrong. But if the students have a problem like that and there's no working there, is that a little bit of a clue that they didn't actually get the answer from up here, but they actually got the answer from in here? Yeah. So there are just logical, common sense things to look for. And blank spaces, don't let them go to the scoring table with blank spaces. If they can't find an answer, they need to put their flag up for the supervisor and say, I can't find the answer to this. Now, don't tell them the answer, because they will put their flag up every 5 minutes because they can't find the answer to everything. Again, I had a student who used to love to put his flag up. As soon as he couldn't skim through and find the answer, his flag would go up and he would say, the answer's not in here. It's not in my pace. And I go, oh, those silly people at ACE. They didn't put the answer in the pace and they expect you to know it. How silly of them. And he'd be sitting there going, and he had some problems, this boy. Anyhow, he'd done it a few times. So we used to have a pace library. I used to keep the old paces that were done until I had one of every single one of them as a reference for myself. So I'd say to him, okay, all right, you've got your pace there. I'm going to go to the pace library and get my pace out. And I'm going to look through it. I'm not going to look at the answer. I'm going to read through the text. Because I'd always say to him, have you read the text? Yes. And I knew he hadn't. So I'd say, all right, so if I find the answer first, then you have to stay in during the break and clean up the learning centre. But if you find the answer first, you can go out 5 minutes early. Well, you'd be amazed how quickly he could find those answers and how soon he stopped putting his flag up to ask that question unless he really couldn't find it. So, be careful. Don't let them manipulate you into telling them the answer. We had a friend from another school at one point came up. We had a few issues at our school and he came up to help at our school. And he was just lovely, but he hadn't been in the learning centre for a long, long time. And one of my boys found out very quickly that if he put his hand up, his flag up, and said to this dear fellow, excuse me, sir, I can't find the answer, then sir would actually go through the pace and go, oh, look, this looks like the answer. Do you think this is the answer? So, of course, the flag kept going up and going up and going up. And if I went to answer his flag, it was, oh, sorry, I left my flag up. But if he went to answer the flag, it was, oh, I can't find the answer. So kids are very, very quick to find out if you're going to give them the answer. And that is a form of cheating, actually, if you think about it, because they're not actually learning, they're not actually doing the work. Okay, spot checking, watching for extra red marks. We're actually going to have a look at some real live examples after this. If the student fails the pace after a high checkup and self-test scores, they're real signs that there is scoring violations. What do you do? What do you do when you found a child who is actually cheating? Well, first of all, you need to apply discernment because we all make mistakes. Some of us today have forgotten to put the red cross in the box, haven't we? Or to put the pencil cross in the box. And it's very easy. And tomorrow, you know what? I've known, particularly on Wednesdays and Thursdays, this happens at training. People have taken homework home or they've scored and they haven't had a chance to rescore. And so they start on the next page the next day and they don't go back and correct it from the day before. Very, very easy to happen. So you need to, in your learning centre, you need to apply discernment. You need to think, when is misscoring considered lying and cheating? My answer to this is when it is intentional. If it is deliberate, and you know that it's deliberate, and remember you are in this learning centre with these children day after day after day, you get to know pretty quick whether it's a mistake or whether it's intentional. Okay, if it's a mistake, we all make mistakes, go fix it up and try and be a little more careful. Okay, if it's intentional, then the next thing is this a recurring problem? Is this happening in this child's all their paces? Is it one particular subject that they're cheating in? Find out the parameters of what they're doing, because then you can address it better. And the thing that I always like to think, to remember is that when you're looking at this and it is intentional, and particularly if it's a recurring problem, this isn't a matter of even attitude, this is a matter of the heart. What's actually happening in this child's heart needs to be dealt with. Because if it's intentional and it's happening over and over and over again, then there's an underlying problem there, which could be anything, but you need to try and work to get to that problem and find out what that is, because otherwise it is going to keep on happening. When should spelling count as a scoring violation? Always. If it's an error, if it's an occasional thing, it's not a big deal. They need to go and correct it. But if it's something, again, that happens all the time, then they need to get a demerit or a detention or whatever you decide is a fitting punishment for what they're doing. Because, remember, whatever you give them as a punishment, they have to dislike enough that they don't want to do it again. We had a teacher who was very lovely, a really creative guy, used to love to sing. And so when our students were on detention, they used to love it when Uncle Michael was, running detention, because he'd bring the guitar and sing to them and they'd all sing. And so detention was one lovely big sing-along. It kind of lost its effect. So, correct spelling is important. Apply discipline. Now, I'm not going to actually answer these questions, but these are things that I want you to think about. How do you use warnings? Are you going to warn the child, or are you simply going to say this was wrong? Now, to some extent, it will depend on the individual child. And you don't have to treat every child the same, because every child has different needs. But you do have to have rules in your learning centre, and they do need to apply to everybody. How do you use demerits? Do you use demerits? If you use demerits, I hope you're also using merits, because it needs the balance there. How do you use detentions? Do you talk to mum and dad? How do you use privileges? There's a whole heap of things that you can do. Maybe you just have a good relationship with that child and you can sit and talk with the child and work it through. Why do scoring violations happen? Well, they didn't check the score key properly. That's usually an error. I just didn't do it right. And we all have days like that. Sometimes they're distracted by other students. There's playing at the scoring station, particularly if they're waiting. It's one of the reasons I don't like children waiting to score. They wait to score in their office. They don't line up at the scoring table. So, because if they line up at the scoring table, what's going to happen? Oh, you get a little bit of this, and he trod on my toe, and I'm first. No, I was here first. You're going to get all of that sort of thing going on. Laziness, in a hurry, bad attitude, rebellion, all of those things can be part of scoring violations. Some kids simply don't care if they got it wrong. Oh, I don't care. I don't want to be here anyhow. So, that's an attitude that you really have to deal with. Didn't get caught last time. Now, this is your smart student. This is your really smart student usually, not your slow learner, not your one who's a bit naughty, but usually this is the clever student who doesn't need to cheat. But they've found a way to cheat and they didn't get caught last time, so they're going to do it again. So hopefully you catch them before too long. This one, trying to please. I didn't want to have to mark it wrong. And they're not going to say this, but this is what they're going to mean, is because you won't like me anymore or you won't love me if I get things wrong. And this is often little children or children with really, really poor self-esteem. Trying to avoid humiliation. Now, this is quite an interesting one, and it does verge on, well, it is actually bullying, so it's something that we need to be aware of. Now, I've seen this happen with a monitor doing this to a child, and I was absolutely horrified and took the monitor and the supervisor aside and spoke to them. When the monitor says, "Did you get it wrong again? Go and get it right." Okay, that's actually humiliating to a child. They're actually, made to feel terrible in front of everybody in the learning centre. Now, the other thing that can happen is, particularly if they go and rescore a number of times, and you've got the smart bully in the class who sees this and at recess, at lunchtime, goes out and says, "Oh, how many times did you have to rescore, you dummy?" So that's bullying. That's bullying behaviour, and the school needs to jump on that really fast, because the little boy or little girl who's been called a dummy, they are never ever going to want to rescore again, because it was a totally humiliating experience, and they're going to do everything that they can to avoid that happening again. And if that means that they cheat, then often they will cheat rather than go through that humiliation again. So when I say that you need to have real discernment in this, I mean you really have to have discernment, because you may not know that this has even happened. Hopefully, if other children see it happening, somebody's going to come and say to you, "Oh, Freddie was really mean to Sally, he said this." But oftentimes kids don't. And so the little one is left to feel totally humiliated and totally terrible, never wanting to rescore. And the guy who is the bully gets away with it, likes the feeling of power, so he's going to do it again. So you need to be really careful. And sometimes they cheat because they are simply frustrated. And I'm thinking particularly in math, with those paces that have page after page of long division or page after page of long multiplication. And, you know, they've done a page of long multiplication, they go to score, and there's, 12 on the page, and they get 7 of them wrong. It's almost like, I just want the ground to swallow me up now. It is really, really frustrating. And then they'll go back and they'll rub them all out, they'll do them again, and they'll go, and there's still 1 wrong or 2 wrong. Now, this can be really, really, it can almost be heartbreaking for children. So again, you need to be aware, and that's why I really recommend that you get your students, when they're going to score, if they're rescoring, they should actually ask the monitor to rescore, because then the monitor who's going around to all the children, she knows that 4 times I've gone to this office and this one has had to rescore. Is it the same pace? Yes, it is. There's a problem here that needs to be dealt with. Hopefully they pick it up before it's 4 times, but in a busy learning centre, that could easily happen. But it can be sheer frustration. I've done it 5 times and it's still wrong. I just want to know the answer. And so oftentimes with those long multiplications or long divisions, they won't change any of the working. They'll just rub out the answer and put the right answer in. So it's reasonably easy to see if they've done that. But that's out of frustration. So you need to teach them a different strategy to deal with that frustration rather than cheating. And of course that is for them to ask for help. I got it wrong. What am I doing wrong? Now, sometimes it's as simple as 7 sevens aren't 48. What are they? Yeah. Sometimes it is as simple as something like that. Just reminding them of something that they're in their stress and trying to get it done, because those pages are really daunting. And they just sometimes just get to that point where they can't really think through it and get it right and get it done. Looking around constantly is often a sign of misscoring or cheating. I'm at the scoring table and I'm going to go, I want to see what's going on. Where is that monitor? Where is the supervisor? Good, now I can cheat. Okay, so that's something to watch for. Why do they do it? The ends justifies the means. Senior students will often say, I've just got to get it finished. So it's not about, I've just got to get it finished. I'm in year 12, I've got to get my paces finished. Well, yes, but do you have scoring policies or rules clearly written and available? Is the learning centre atmosphere a good learning environment? Are your children feeling comfortable enough to ask for help? Do they think it's okay to ask for help? And do your learning centres follow the same procedures? How to prevent it? Well, there is no prevention. Just like there is no real cure for sin, we all still do it, even though we know it's wrong in one way or another. So there is no real prevention. But things that you can do to limit the amount of cheating is to use your parent conferences, make parents aware of what is required in the learning centre, build bridges of trust between you and your students. This is probably the biggest one. If students trust that you are going to come and help them, then the need to score is reduced. All the frustration, all of those things, even the bully in the playground. Miss, this happened to me in the playground. If you have those build bridges of trust between you and the students, then oftentimes you can circumvent a lot of those things happening. Make sure they understand how to score and make sure the rules are clear. Be consistent. Be consistent about the level of scoring that you expect. Do it right because it's right, and praise character. Don't always just tell them when they've done it wrong, but tell them when they've done it right. Oh, Ben, you've scored so well today. I haven't seen, you haven't done one single thing wrong. For a child, that's great. We like it when someone praises us. I don't know how many times I've heard people in this actual building go, oh, nobody ever appreciates what I do. And that's because we're so slow at giving praise. We forget to say thank you for somebody who's done something, or wow, you do a great job, or, it doesn't take much. But we're very quick to criticise, but we're very, very slow to praise. And we need to change that around, particularly in the learning centre, so that we're very quick to praise and the criticism is done gently and in a caring way so that it's not a terrible thing to have happen. Set a good example and follow the procedures, and your learning centre will not be foolproof, but it will be a lot better place for the students. Thank you.